Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lisa Garcia. I'm the Community Outreach Director for ION Sacramento, as well as the Vice President. On behalf of ION Sacramento and the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County, we'd like to welcome you. This is the first of 9 forums that we'll be conducting throughout the city of Sacramento over the next 3 months. We'd like to thank our special sponsor, Access Sacramento. They're recording this forum, which will be televised on several occasions. Yes, you can give them, thank you. They'll be televising this on several occasions over the next coming week. So we will post the schedule on our website as soon as that information becomes available to us. We'd like to thank the Friends of East Sacramento. They're a nonprofit organization. They help make this forum possible for us tonight, and especially Lisa Schmidt, who runs things here, and she really does a great job of it. She's been awesome, so thank you so much. Yeah.
It's beautiful video.
We'd also like to thank our co-sponsors. If you have a flyer of the event tonight, we have all of our co-sponsors listed on there as well, so our thanks to them. We have a sign-up sheet out front on the table as you came in. If you have not yet had the opportunity to sign up, we'd love for you to take the opportunity to do so before you leave tonight. We'd really like the community to be an ongoing part of this process. We'd like to keep you engaged in the process throughout, and we'd like to notify you of events and forums that are coming up scheduled in the next few weeks. So again, if you could please get your contact information, that would be great. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our panelists for this evening. At the end of the table here on my right is Miss Paula Lee. She is the president of the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County. And next to her, in between myself and her, is Craig Powell, who is the president of ION Sacramento. To my left here is City Councilman Jeff Harris. He's the newly elected member of the Sacramento City Council. He represents the East Sacramento and South Natomas communities. And next to him is Professor Kimberly Nadler. She's the professor of government at the California State University here in Sacramento. She's the founder and director for an informed electorate at CSUS. So, thank you.
Actually pronounced Nalder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's not your fault.
And we do have another guest that will be coming. Unfortunately, he's coming from the Bay Area and he's stuck in traffic. Mr. Peter Shearer, he's one of the most respected veteran advocates for open government and transparency in California. He's also the longtime executive director of the California First Amendment Coalition. So we're hoping he'll be here to join us shortly. Okay, so we are going to right now allow each of our panelist guests a couple minutes to open up with comments. So I'm going to start with Councilmember Jeff Harris.
Well, good evening. It's truly a pleasure for me to be here at Clooney Auditorium because I've been here for so many events, and of course the last time I was here, I was a candidate for the job of City Council. And so it's a slightly different vantage point now, having been elected. And I've got about two months and a week at City Hall, and I've had time to sort of sort out how the process works. And I'm happy to say that this particular iteration of the council seems to be very open and collaborative, which I was maybe slightly surprised at and very happy to find. People have been very welcoming to me and very helpful to get myself and my staff up to speed so that I can be an effective representative. Being a representative means that you take into consideration the will of all your constituents. There is no specific issue that I could vote on in which I would please everybody. It could never happen. But in the course of my campaign, I spent a fair amount of time trying to get the pulse on the electorate in District 3. And through thousands of conversations, I think that I got a pretty good picture of how, the will of the most of the people, what they feel on, certainly on the big issues. I will always strive to keep our office open and inviting to all my constituents, and it is already proving to be so. We get lots of calls every day with constituent issues. ranging from big to small. People have called up and talked about the streetcar. People have called up and talked about trash in the street and everything in between. So, you know, the chores of a city council member are very big and diverse, and I find the job absolutely fascinating. I can tell you that I'm having a great time, and I told my staff right at the beginning that we were going to have some fun doing this job, and we already are. So I thank you for, you know, everybody, for those who supported me and those who didn't. Again, my office is open, and I'm always eager to hear your concerns. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you. And Kimberly?
So, looking at this crowd, I'm really heartened to think that there are this many people who would show up in the evening to hear a bunch of people talk about transparency and ethics in government. And if you look at the turnout numbers from November, I think this is like half the electorate of Sacramento who showed up today. So that's a good sign, I guess, that you know, people are interested in doing something, you know, with parts of Measure L that were probably more popular amongst most of the electorate, having to do with transparency and openness in government, that were probably sweeteners on that measure, but certainly had some merit for a lot of voters. I run an organization at Sacramento State called the Project for an Informed Electorate, and so we work on that, obviously. We do some research. We have a research lab where we look at how local TV news covers government and elections, campaign advertisements. We did some ad watches with KCRA and Capital Public Radio for this last election. So a lot of what we've been working on with the Project for an Informed Electorate is obviously informing voters, but also making sure that they're informed properly, that they're not misinformed, that they don't believe things that are not true. So that's what the ad watches are about and some of our other research. We've also done some polling that I'll talk about as we get into this report a little bit about local government and what people believe, what they want from the governments, and how much they know about local government. And I don't want this to be too much of a spoiler, but people don't know that much about government. I know it's surprising, but it's heartening to think that we might make some changes, that there's might be some momentum towards making some changes, at least in the city of Sacramento, that might bring some more people out to participate because they have more trust and a higher sense of efficacy, hopefully, if they feel like there's transparency and high ethical standards for their government.
Great, thank you very much for that. Okay, so the way that the forum is going to work this evening is it is going to be broken down into 4 segments. We have the Ethics Code, Ethics Commission, Open Government, and Redistricting Commission. When you came in, hopefully you got the handout, the information here, that you can follow along as we proceed with the forum. It is our report, and so it has all the information available in it. So like I said, hopefully if you haven't gotten one, you can get them at the table right outside the front door. So the segments are going to begin with either Paula or Craig. They each have their own segment that they'll be leading. They're going to be allowed 5 minutes to open the segment, and then we're going to give each of the panelists 2 minutes to follow up on with comments. Eric over here to my left, he's our timekeeper. He will be holding up those signs. Panelists, I just ask that you please. We do want to move things along so that we can get to questions, comments, and suggestions, because that's really the heart of the reason why we are here this evening. I'm just going to ask you that when we get to that segment of questions, that you please limit your questions to as minimal time as possible so that we can ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to address the panel this evening. If you'd like to ask your question to a specific panel member, just please let us know which panel member that you'd like to ask that question to before you start your question. And if you'd rather write your question down because you're not comfortable asking it, we do have comment forms that are either at the front table, or Charlene against the left wall here is holding up paper. She has those forms, so you can fill those out and we'll have somebody ask that question for you. So based on that information, we're going to go ahead and get started. The first segment that we're going to start off with is the Ethics Code, and Ms. Paula Lee, we'll go ahead and let you start that off.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
No opening remarks from me. We're going to get right to it. The Institute for Local Government says, A key goal of public service ethics is for members of the public to be assured that personal interests play no role in a public servant's decision. While state law establishes certain minimal ethical standards local officials must follow, that would be like gift limits or financial interest disclosures, campaign finance reporting. A number of cities go beyond these basic requirements, and they adopt codes that provide more comprehensive and often stricter limits on the public officials' conduct. There are two general types of local ethics codes. Rules-based ethics codes, that's what we'll talk about first. There's also values-based ethics codes. A values-based ethics code it actually emphasizes what public servants should aspire to rather than actual legal prohibitions. But both of them really seek to promote the integrity of public decision-making. So the city of Sacramento, we do not have a comprehensive ethics code. There are ethics-related provisions that are built in to various sections of our municipal code of law, but they are simply state minimum standards. So rules-based ethics codes establish rules that prohibit certain types of conduct. An example, the state law prohibits officials from receiving more than $460 in gifts from a single source. But Los Angeles's ethics code says that the gift has to be no more than $100. So rules-based ethics codes, such as those adopted by Los Angeles and other cities, will regulate many situations where a conflict of interest might arise. These are some examples of rules-based ethics codes. A code of conduct, financial disclosure, nepotism, campaign reporting, registration and reporting of lobbyists, limitations on travel and gifts. I like this one, whistleblower protections, limits on secondary employment and post-employment restrictions. Now, values-based ethics codes. You can see they look quite different. These are codes that represent more of what to do instead of what not to do. And unlike the rules-based ethics codes, these are based on, they're not legally enforceable. So they're really seeking to create a culture in our city that would embrace responsible public service, and something that goes beyond technical legal rules. So you can see they look quite different. Honesty, integrity, pursuit of public interest over private interest, community service, compassion, proper and efficient use of public resources, loyalty to your agency, and they have a vision. Now, some cities actually have a hybrid of both rules-based ethics codes and values-based ethics codes. But those are the differences.
Okay. Greg, did you want to go ahead and comment?
Yeah, one comment I had is, it has to do with the enforceability of these rules. And that's with regard to an ethics code. If you have an ethics code that is rules-based, having bright lines, very clear standards, can be objectively measured, then you're going to have a set of rules that are enforceable by law, by, for instance, by an ethics commission, which is our next subject of study. But if you have a values-based system, you're really hard-pressed to have the degree of specificity and objectivity to be able to levy any kind of fine or really enforce in any way. So that's one of the considerations for it. The other, just kind of clued in on regulation of post-employment activities. We had just an example here in Sacramento where we had a labor official who became the director of the city's Department of Human Resources in charge of negotiating with all city unions contracts. And then, about 3 months after she left city employment, she went to work being the leader of another city union, which was a violation, a real crystal clear violation of the city's existing revolving door rule, which is a 1-year hiatus. You got to pause for a year before you can take a position where you're doing business with the city. But there was zero enforcement. And no, I think it was a 2-year standard of 1. I'm not sure, but there was zero enforcement. City attorney wasn't interested in it, and the like. So these codes have an opportunity to really visit those areas where we can do more than just say tisk tisk. So I appreciate that presentation follow-up.
Thank you. And Councilmember Harris, did you want to add comment to that?
Sure. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we already have in Sacramento. So when we look at rules-based ethics codes, we do have financial disclosure, campaign reporting restrictions. These are mostly through the FPPC. Conflict of interest and appearance of conflict of interest. It was interesting, as soon as I was elected, the city attorney sat me down and spent quite a long time with me discussing what conflict of interest is and what the appearance of conflict of interest is and how they're both unique and important. We definitely have limitations on travels and gifts. We do have some whistleblower protections from the auditor's office. I agree with Craig that enforcement is very important. These things need to be watched, and if there are infractions, there should be some penalty. As far as value-based ethics, you can only really judge a person by having some interaction with them. If you're going to get some kind of handle on the honesty and integrity of a candidate, you have to meet them. You have to talk to them. You have to query them about things that are on your mind. And that's why I think it's so important for the electorate to be very engaged in who they elect. And I see this as one of the big fall downs in our political system, is that people have become apathetic and they don't get seriously involved in every campaign of everybody who's going to represent them. It takes a lot of work. You have to invest your own time into meeting those candidates, to go into the debates, to go into the forums. But that is truly the only way you'll ever get a sense of the values and ethics of a candidate. And so, to that end, that's why I think that as much as possible, candidates should go door to door and meet the electorate. It's the only way for it to go in reverse, to offer to the people whose confidence you are trying to get, say, look, check out who I am. See what you think. Thank you.
Professor?
Yeah, I would just briefly add that the rules-based approach. Welcome. The rules-based approach seems to make sense, obviously, because you need to have teeth to anything you do and enforceability. But the ethics-based, I think there's some merit to that in that there's a lot of recent research in pedagogy, how we teach, and also political psychology that shows that people meet the expectations set by those around them. So if a teacher has high expectations of a particular student, they actually perform better. And so I think there's some value to that as well, and that people, if it's very explicit that there are certain expectations that they're expected to rise to, we may see some of that.
Okay, very good, thank you. So our last panelist, Mr. Peter Shearer, has arrived. Welcome. We know that you came from the Bay Area, so we certainly appreciate you coming this distance. We did go ahead and open up and allow each of the panelists 2 minutes just to open up with information about yourself. If you'd like to give us a little bio on you real quick, we'd love to have that. Thank you.
Very briefly, my name is Peter Shearer, and I'm the Executive Director of the First Amendment Coalition. We are based in the Bay Area in San Rafael. The organization is a nonprofit, legally focused, that is dedicated to government transparency, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and government transparency. We're sort of, the organization's programs are predicated on the idea that only through transparency in government can you truly achieve government accountability. And government accountability, of course, is the essential element of real democracy. We try to facilitate citizen access to information about local government. And we do that in a variety of ways, but principally by enforcing and working through lawsuits and other means to strengthen the legal tools that you have in California to learn about what government is up to, what government decision makers are doing, and how to have an impact on that process yourself as a citizen. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We did just cover our first segment, which is on ethics codes. We're allowing each panelist 2 minutes to talk about that. Did you want to defer your time to another subject, or did you want to comment on that?
Has everyone already commented?
They have. We've already done that, yes.
Transparency is still to come, Peter.
Transparency, yes. We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
So.
I'll speak just very briefly about the idea of an ethics code. I think an ethics code with teeth is a fundamentally important set of rules for any community, for any local government. It is somewhat complicated by the fact that when we are talking about legislative officials, people who sit on city councils or supervisors in a county board of supervisors or members of a school board, you're talking there typically about people who function in a legislative capacity. And for some reason in America, not just California, but throughout the country, we've come to think of people whose job is essentially legislative as people who are supposed to be subject to influence from special interests, to influence from major contributors, to influence from various organized groups like associations of insurers or labor unions. And unfortunately, we've reached a point, I think, in many cities in California, Sacramento no exception, where the truth is that legislators get away with far, far too much in that regard. And there's no reason why we shouldn't hold them to much higher standards of ethical behavior and force them, as much as we can, to serve in the public interest, not in the special interests that elected them.
Great, thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and move on now to the second segment, and that is the Ethics Commission. Ms. Paula Lee, would you like to go ahead and get us started on that?
All right. So if government ethics is about ensuring that public servants, and that means elected officials and department heads and civil service employees, make decisions to benefit the public and not their own personal interests, then we need some way of enforcing that. And that's what an ethics commission does. It's an independent body that is used to enforce these laws. And if there is a perception that these laws will go unenforced or worse, be selectively enforced, there's a big problem. So many cities have, the larger cities have ethics commissions, and there is a great chart in the report that compares these cities. Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland have all adopted ethics commissions to address concerns. It's really key that these ethics commissions be independent. And that way the community can really hold their government officials accountable. Currently, the city of Sacramento, as you know, does not have an ethics commission. Right now, the city clerk is responsible for some of the activities that maybe a local commission could do, like campaign finance disclosure. But the city clerk is appointed by and really works for the city council. And in that case, they're not really independent. And they can't, a city clerk really has no enforcement power. So most of those actions might be referred to the FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission. But as you can well imagine, the FPPC is a very, very busy place, looking at financial campaign disclosure statements and investigating violations. So the city clerk is not able to really be independent, and the FPPC is not able to really handle and police the day-to-day activities of local officials. I mean, considering there are so many, over 500 municipalities that have these guidelines. So ethics commissions then are typically given jurisdiction to enforce any laws that would otherwise require city leaders to sit in judgment of themselves. You can see that that's really not going to work. So examples of these conflicts of interest could be financial interest disclosures, campaign laws, lobbying restrictions, open meeting and public records laws, and compensation for elected officials. Key elements. There are 3 very key elements: independence, guaranteed annual budgets, and enforcement power. Those are very, very key to a successful ethics commission. You may have heard during the Measure L campaign talk about an ethics committee, and that is very different from an ethics commission. An ethics committee is advisory and has no enforcement power. So I just wanted to make that distinction for you. What we're really hoping for Sacramento is an ethics commission with enforcement power. The key to a good enforcement outcome is that the commission be very independent. Independence is promoted in 2 ways. It's promoted through the selection process of the commissioners themselves. Most cities prohibit city employees from being on the commission, or contractors with the city, lobbyists. An ethics commission also has staffing and costs, and that is something you need to know. Usually the money comes out of the general fund. Oh, already? I have a few more things, sorry. I did the codes pretty fast. I just wanted to give you the example of Oakland. During the recession, Oakland's had an ethics commission, but it came to a virtual stop because it wasn't funded. And so last November, the voters in Oakland adopted a charter amendment that funds their ethics commission. They're required now to have at least 5 full-time staff. So check out that chart that's in the report, because you can see what each city does and what the scope of responsibility is for their ethics commission, how they appoint their ethics commission, the staffing, their budget, all of that. One other thing I must say about ethics commissions that I discovered, and you'll read in the report, is that it's really important that they have their own legal staff. I'm sure our panel can comment on that further.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Paula. I wanted to bring up an example of how having an ethics commission in Sacramento would have led to a better result. You may have recalled during the arena deal battle, the arena subsidy battle, that a ballot measure was submitted that would call for a public vote on whether the city should provide subsidies. And a requisite number of signatures were included in those petitions. But the city decided to bring a lawsuit to legally challenge the initiative based on some technicalities. And there was a legal opinion by the city attorney's office to the city council that leaked. And basically the opinion to the council said, this suit doesn't have all that great a chance of winning. And I'm paraphrasing. Now that was leaked. That leak was attributable to a certain city councilman member, Kevin McCarty. And so he was essentially brought up on charges by the rest of the city council. And so we had this situation where you had one faction of the council that was in support of this arena subsidy and another side that was against it, essentially. And you had one faction meting out punishment against someone who had leaked an opinion that would have helped, supposedly, this arena initiative. So that was a no-win situation for the city council, because even if they were right in censoring Mr. McCarty, they're still going to be accused and it's going to be suspected by the public that it was motivated for a political reason. Whereas if that matter had been adjudicated by an ethics commission that was truly independent, then they wouldn't have had that problem. But whenever a punishment is met out against a political opponent, there is always going to be the suspicion that it was politically motivated instead of being legitimate.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harris?
Well, let me build upon that analogy by Craig about the arena. So it was a difficult process, and well, let me backtrack a little bit. Why would you want to have an ethics commission? I would say it's because the public perception is that their will is not being heeded, that they suspect wrongdoing or they suspect special interests in affecting the votes of their electeds. So would an ethics commission have guided us through the whole process of the arena? You know, as you know, I was a proponent of the electorate's ability to vote on that particular project because I thought it was very significant. And now, of course, we have several lawsuits against the arena. Some have already been dismissed. There's certainly at least one more pending. Would an ethics commission have obviated the need for those lawsuits? Would it have saved us money? An ethics commission will definitely tax the general fund. They're not cheap. And we know this because we're just now instituting an independent budget analyst office. That decision was taken in 2010 but never funded, and we decided to fund it this year. So that's one more layer that we feel will be protection for the electorate, in that the public will get to be very vocal in the budget process, and it will be open and transparent. So there's lots of ways to build on this. I don't really have the answer about whether an ethics commission would have been efficacious in helping us through the arena conundrum. I suspect that it could possibly have been, but lawsuits, of course, can be waged with or without an ethics commission. But, you know, it's an intriguing idea. The only downside I see to a commission is that they are costly.
Thank you.
If I may comment, I did notice that one of the attorneys representing the plaintiffs in that last remaining legal challenge is in the audience tonight. Maybe during the public comment section of the program, he might mention whether he thinks if the city had had an ethics commission, it might have made a difference in bringing this matter to light and to adjudication.
Okay. Professor, did you want to comment?
The idea of an ethics commission seems like a great one in many respects, but I think that you're bringing up a lot of the aspects that need to be in place, which is longevity. There's the potential to defund an organization like that, and it needs to have actual teeth. But the benefit is greater than in the specific examples we might come up with in the city, in that it instills a sense of what in political science we call efficacy, but just a sense that what citizens do, what citizens care about, will become manifest in the outcomes at the city level. So if we had an ethics commission that was ongoing, that was seen doing good work, that was independent, it would translate into more of a sense of confidence in our city government. You can compare sort of across the United States. As you move west, you get more open, transparent, and ethical in your city governments. Think about, many East Coast cities, or Chicago, or New Orleans. We don't want to have an electorate that thinks of its city government in that way, that, it's all in the pocket of the developers or the big businesses or whatever it is. An ethics commission could really help with that sense of efficacy, which also, in turn, of course, impacts participation, which we all want.
I think ethics commissions are good in theory, less good in practice of those that I've had some familiarity with in California. One of the difficulties, I think, is that there's a tendency to convert what often are political disputes that need to be resolved in the political forum into ethical or quasi-legal disputes, which then in turn escalate into multifaceted litigation disputes. At the end of the day, a lot of money is spent, and I'm not sure that the public interest is terrifically served. My general bias in this area is in favor not so much of creating enforcement agencies and investigative bodies, but rather to rigorously enforce rigorous rules about disclosure. If you have complete and timely disclosure by public officials when they are involved in decisions, then you leave it essentially to the political process, that is to say, to the voters, to decide whether the actions that ultimately were taken for legitimate reasons, or for erroneous reasons, or political reasons, or self-serving reasons. But the key here is that the disclosure must be complete, it must be timely, and there must be serious sanctions for failing to disclose what you're required to disclose. And those sanctions would include stiff penalties and rescission of votes taken by a body where an essential member in the majority failed to make necessary disclosures. That would have a great deterrent effect, I believe.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to turn now to the third segment of the report, which is open government, and Craig's going to go ahead and lead the conversation on that.
First, I'm going to take a minute to provide a little overview of the process we're going through tonight. Paul and I didn't do an introduction, but I think at this point it's critical to know where this forum fits in to what we're trying to do and what we envision. A lot of this came out of Measure L, where these good government provisions got tanked with the tanking of Measure L. And the League of Women Voters and I in Sacramento agreed that it is a mistake for this community not to separately address and consider these ideas. We prepared this report, which is a survey. It's a survey of what other cities have done. It is not prescriptive. It is not our recommendation on what should be done. The purpose of this report, and the reason we're hosting these forums, is to stimulate and begin a public conversation on these issues. We are absolutely of the opinion that any sort of ethics reform, transparency reform, redistricting reform will be effective and meaningful and robust only if it comes from the citizens, if it's citizen-driven. If government itself tries to reform itself, you just don't get the same good result. Funny how that works. So it's critical if there be, if the community wants it, that they come out and express what they want, and they do so through these forums. The focal point of the forum tonight is going to be the public comment we hear from you. We are simply just trying to be a catalyst for conversation, for a community debate over the next few months. Now, where do we go from there? Well, our process is going to be, after these forums are completed, to digest all the comments, and we have a research and drafting committee, a working group, the League, ION Sacramento, and our co-sponsors, that is going to be working through the legislative proposals. Is going to be actually drafting proposed legislation. And I want to introduce a gentleman who's here tonight who is chairing that committee. He's a local attorney, and his name is Nicholas Hydor. Nicholas, would you please stand up if you're anywhere here? There he is. And Nicholas is a very able young attorney. He happens to also be a member of the adjunct faculty at McGeorge, where he teaches a course in legislation. So we could not ask for better background experience and credentials for someone to draft legislation. The next step is going to be to publicly vet the legislation, probably with maybe a public forum or two, and then to bring it before the city council for them to consider it. Some of these measures, if indeed this is what the people want, is say a transparency ordinance, can be adopted by ordinance. Others would require amendments to the city charter. An ethics commission would, an independent redistricting commission would. So we would be asking the city council to place the measure before the voters in 2016. I think it's also important to know that the city council has initiated their own parallel process to what we're doing. But they've assigned the work to an ad hoc council committee. And that's a concern of ours. We don't question their commitment or their good faith towards the goal, but we're of the opinion that it should be a very, very public process, and an ad hoc committee is a closed process. So what we hope is a collaborative result and a collaborative process, working hand in glove with the elected officials and city staff, so that we have a convergence. And that result hopefully will result in the finest possible ethics reform, of which the people of Sacramento, we believe, will be immensely proud. So with that, by way of introduction, and I hope I haven't stolen too much of my time, but I want to get on to transparency, or open government, or sunshine ordinances. Professor Alder made a very good point. People are disconnected from local government. They're grossly ill-informed about it, and they don't know how to get involved, even if they were motivated to do so. So having an open, accessible government is critical if we're going to have a resurgence in civic engagement in their local government. Absolutely indispensable. It ought to be real easy for folks to go down to City Hall and speak to the City Council to make their voices heard. It's not so easy today, with only 2 minutes to talk and having to wait to the end of the agenda at 10 o'clock and other user-unfriendly elements. So it's useful, it's not only useful, it's essential if we're going to restore some connection between citizens and their government, that they have an ease of access. The other piece of it is the watchdog role that citizens play, organizations play, the media plays. How do we know what our government's doing if we don't have reasonable access to it? And so that's the basis of our current transparency laws, which really derive from state law, or actually are in state law. There's two critical ones that we have, kind of the granddaddy rules. One is the Brown Act, the Ralph M. Brown Act, which is the open government law, requiring that our city council meetings be open to the public, that they publish agendas, that you have an opportunity to speak. The other major law is the California Public Records Act. And this is the one that compels government to give you records when you request them. And it has certain standards and rules. They're supposed to respond within 10 days, but there's a heck of a lot of exceptions and exclusions. And it's very difficult for private citizens to enforce. Those are what we have now. That's what we refer to as the baseline. What the transparency ordinances that have been adopted by cities around the state, there's been about 12 or 15 of them, what they do is that they are supplements to the baseline established by the Brown Act and by the Public Records Act. And they added tremendous more protections and additional rights that layer on top of that the base rights that you get under the Brown Act and under the Public Records Act. So, with that in mind, what kind of rules are we talking about when it comes to the application of these laws and what special provisions exist? Well, it's no surprise that with the advance of technology, we have a whole new cluster of issues that are really important. And one of them is on the issue of email. And I think Peter would probably agree that disputes over email access is one of the biggest concerns we have with local government and transparency rules. As a matter of fact, Ion Sacramento and the First Amendment Coalition were co-petitioners in a lawsuit against the city to compel them to cough up some emails between city council members with respect to the 2011 Redistricting Commission. We won't get into the details of that, but suffice it to say that they're critically important, and there's certainly burning issues that are undecided, and we have split decisions by the courts, such as what about a council member who sends emails on official city business but uses his private cell phone? Is that accessible or not to the public for public records requests? And the courts are split. Now, some transparency ordinances resolve that issue by saying, we don't care whether you store it on your personal device or not. If it's city business, it should be disclosed, which we believe is probably the superior rule. The other concern with regard to emails has to do with retention policies. In the old days, when communication was done primarily by letter, it made some sense to have a policy that said after a year or 2 or 4, you dispose of the letter because it takes up file cabinet space and office space. But that's no longer a real consideration when it comes to retaining emails. And we have some news for you today, and actually it was revealed by Cosmo Garvin's column this week in Sacramento News and Review. And that is that the city is sitting on about many, many years of emails, say 10 years. They've held on to much longer than their formal policy calls for. Their policy calls for holding them for 2 months, for 2 years. But they haven't gotten around to deleting them. So now they propose this bulk email deletion of God knows how many of them. And we really have concerns with that. Why do we have concerns? Well, if you perhaps read the News and Review a couple of months ago, you saw a series of stories written by an investigative journalist by the name of Joe Rubin. He revealed massive waste in the city's water meter installation program. And we're talking tens and perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars. And he was able to reveal that because he had access to emails dating back to 2008. And that is leading to a change in city policy, an important one, to which will save millions of dollars. So if this 2-year retention policy had been in place at the time when he was doing his investigation, we would never have learned about it. Similarly, we've had federal prosecutions and bribery convictions of city officials based on emails that are more than 2 years old. They would probably have been impossible to prosecute had a 2-year retention policy been in place. So having, and given the declining, rapidly falling cost of storing emails, hell, you can buy a handful of flash drives and essentially be able to maintain your emails. It doesn't make a lot of sense anymore to have these very short expiration periods for how long you hold on to emails. We have similar issues with archived video of city council meetings. One more minute. There's a lot of issues on city websites. A lot of transparency ordinance require certain things be listed on city websites and certain updates be made. Some cities require the calendars of city officials to be posted online. A few ordinances require that the city clerk post and create a public records research index with a uniform reference system to make it easier for citizens to access electronic documents on their own. Speaker times. How long are you able to speak at a public meeting at City Council? Sacramento is the shortest in the state at 2 minutes. We're tied with Oakland for the shortest period of time. Having public comment at an end of a council meeting is a burden on people who can't stay there for hours on end. We have some cities that require that the reviews of the city manager and his compensation review be in public. We have also this concern with city ad hoc committees, where we essentially have, to the extent that they assign responsibility for certain areas to an ad hoc committee, we have what critics would call secret government, since they are completely impervious to public view. So those are some of the concerns with transparency and some of the things that transparency ordinances can do and address. Paul?
Didn't want to comment, Paula? Okay. Okay. Did you want to go ahead, Councilmember?
Okay. Listen, I'd like to apologize for my rather nasal voice. I have been afflicted by the bug that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. You know, I believe that an informed and engaged electorate is really the foundation of a functional government. And certainly a sunshine ordinance is a way to empower the electorate to be more engaged. Transparency is a good thing in government. You have to make judgment calls about, say, for instance, deleting emails. You know, you have a statute of limitation. Should they be kept indefinitely? Should we make it 3 years? Should we make it 5 years? You know, everybody would have to sort of decide for themselves, you know, what was a reasonable period of time to keep records. It is a chore to catalog them and keep them and make them accessible. So there again, that's an expense for the city government, but it may well be a good one. Public engagement is very important. And before I got elected, I went to city council numerous times, and I spoke when there was a 3-minute limit many times. And when it was reduced to 2, I found that often I couldn't get said what I felt I needed to get said. I know that we have experienced a lot of frustration with that. Some people have commented on it at council. I think it's a valid point. The flip side of that, however, is if you've watched a city council meeting in the last 2 months, you know that we have a core of people protesting various issues who speak to any item on the agenda and bring forth the same, you know, point of view over and over. So I've sat through 3 to 4 hours of public comment from a group of about 17 people. That's fair. You know, that's the public process, and that's what's required of me as a city council member. I just wanted to point out that things like that do go both ways. So when looking at transparency, you know, ideas, you need to consider the efficacy and how much you would like your city to invest in those.
Okay, thank you. Professor?
In 2013, we did a poll on local government with the Center for California Studies and the Institute for Social Research on the Sac State campus. This was not Sacramento specific. It was randomized throughout the state of California, and people in particular communities were clustered, so we asked questions of people there. And what we found was that approval, the ghost is back, that approval rates for local officials were much higher than they were at higher levels of office. So we have this sort of inherent trust. We found majorities that said that they trusted their local officials to do what was right most of the time, about 61%. We also found 61% thinking that, which is amazing, right, considering the premise of this thing. 61% also thought that the people in their local government knew what they were doing, that they were competent most of the time. So, you know, majority thought that they were basically doing the right thing and that they knew what they were doing. But when people were asked about their efficacy, if they thought that members of the city council and their mayors cared about what people like them thought, or that people like them could make a difference, we had in the mid-40s agreeing with that. So those numbers went down. So I think you can bring those together by looking at the knowledge. So the political knowledge is low, especially about what cities do. So we had one really revealing question where we asked people, of the following choices, what does your city or town spend the most amount of money on? Okay, so you can play along at home on this one. What does your city spend the most amount of money on? Is it public safety, food stamps, Medi-Cal, aid to other cities or something else. Well, no, something else was not an option, actually. It's just those options, okay? So if you know anything about it, you'll realize that there's only one right answer. It's public safety. It's the only one that's a city responsibility, right? The others are not at that level of government. And we only had, let's see, 25% got that. 16% thought it was food stamps. 15% thought it was Medi-Cal. 3% went for aid to other California cities, which we totally made up. And this is unusual in polls. 41% said they were not sure, they just didn't know. Usually in polls, people have a tendency to want to give some answer because they don't want to look stupid. But 41% were just willing to say, I have no idea on this one. So that's the level of understanding that people have about what governments do and what cities are even responsible for, what each layer of government does. So when it comes to sort of more fine-grained issues like, you know, what's the accountability within a particular city structure, we're fighting an enormous battle of understanding. And transparency can help with that, but it can only help with that insofar as people have access to the information and know how to access it and are motivated to access it. It needs to be user-friendly. So for example, at the state level, the Secretary of State's office releases a lot of election information. You can go online for the state of California, you can find out what the donations are to campaigns, but putting all of that information together is very difficult. I put students on that task before to do research for me, and they find it incredibly challenging, and they have help, right? So the average citizen won't be able to access this information unless we make it as easy to use as your iPhone is, or as Amazon is, or any of these other sorts of means of accessing information. Otherwise, it will just be the activists who pay attention to these things. I'm overusing my time here, but this is my main thing.
I'd like to point out that Ion Sacramento has given us 2 minutes for our answers, but we don't have to wait to the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shearer?
Thank you. So we're talking about the idea of a local ordinance, a so-called sunshine ordinance, which, as has been explained, would supplement the basic laws that apply throughout California in this area, the Open Meeting Law, the Brown Act, and the Freedom of Information Law, which is the Public Records Act. I think that a sunshine ordinance in this city or any other can be a wonderful thing if it's done right. And if it's not done right, it can just be, in the end, another obstacle to government transparency and political accountability. My idea for a model, if you will, sunshine ordinance is somewhat controversial, but fundamentally it goes like this. We have these 2 laws that apply to all of us, the Brown Act and the Public Records Act. And when they were originally drafted and enacted, they were pretty good. But over the years, through special interest lobbying and a series of bad and unfortunate court decisions, these laws have become riddled with exceptions, and some of them are huge exceptions, so big as to swallow the basic requirement of disclosure. And my idea for a local ordinance is to simply say, in this city, in Sacramento, we are not going to adhere to the following 4 California Supreme Court decisions in the administration of the Public Records Act here and in our local ordinance. In our city, we are going to change several key provisions that provide that create unnecessary secrecy in local government, and we're going to take them away. Just a few examples. Police records are impossible to get under the Public Records Act. So simply we should have, a local ordinance should say, police records are gettable here in Sacramento. Under the Public Records Act and the Brown Act more specifically, union negotiations with cities, for example, over police compensation and benefits or other security forces, those are the single biggest ticket item on any city's budget. It crowds out everything else. 70 or 80% of all spending in Sacramento, I'm almost certain, goes for that. And yet, when the decisions are made about how much to increase compensation for the next 3 to 5, 6 years, or how to adjust and tweak pension plans, or how to pay for, or how much to increase or to adjust health care benefits for retirees of city government, guess what? All of those discussions and all of those decisions take place in secret. And you hear about them in an announcement for a upcoming city council meeting. If you're lucky, you will then see a draft of this massive memorandum of understanding, which is the agreement with the unions. And if you're lucky, you'll see it 48 hours before the meeting. And of course, it's already a fait accompli. The city council members have already agreed to it in principle through their negotiators. And if they were to change it, they might not even be able to change it at that point. So that's another area where a local ordinance simply needs to demand some access to those documents well before they get voted on. There are other examples I'd be happy to go into, but
Mr.
I realize
Shearer?
that my time
I know,
is
just real quick. Did you want to defer your 2 minutes on redistricting and continue talking for an additional 2 minutes?
Sure.
Okay.
You also need to make very clear, there are certain mistakes that are easy to make. You want to make clear in a local ordinance that its invocation is completely optional. In other words, sometimes, if you're fighting over access to records, for example, with a local agency, it's in your interest, you really want to be able to just get to Superior Court and get in front of a judge and argue your right of access to those records and to use the California Public Records Act. You don't want to be in a situation where you first have to try to demonstrate your right of access under some other law, and then only after exhausting the remedies that might be available under a local ordinance proceed to court. It's a great one. I would applaud you and urge you to seriously consider creating a local ordinance, because it's a wonderful moment actually to debate how much transparency and how much access you want as citizens, and you think the people need, versus how much secrecy government officials in some instances may legitimately need to be able to govern efficiently and effectively. The answer is not always completely obvious, and it's a good opportunity to sort of return to first principles about democratic government and the representative form of government that we have. But I think I will stop myself there and turn over the rest of my time to you.
So we will be moving on now to the fourth segment here, and that is on the Redistricting Commission. Craig, you have 5 minutes to say what you need to say. Ms. Paula, you'll have an additional 2 minutes, and each panelist outside of Mr. Shearer will have 2 minutes, and then we will move on to our questions and suggestion comment portion of the forum. So,
Thank
Craig?
you, Lisa. I'm going to use about 30 seconds as a little follow-up to what Peter had to say. In Sacramento, through the efforts of Councilmember Jay Shearer, sponsoring a council rule change, we have a 10-day, what we refer to as a sunshine rule, requiring major contracts of over $1 million to be posted 10 days before a council vote. That was a big battle to get that done. We proposed 10 transparency reforms a few years ago. We got that one passed, although frankly it was one of the most important ones. So a labor contract, at least we get 10 days to read it, even though we have absolutely zero input into it, and we don't know what it costs. Council members don't even know what it costs. They don't even do fiscal analysis of the out your costs of pension costs and so forth for the benefit of the council when they do labor deals. They may do it in private. I won't question Jeff and tempt him to blow secrecy, but nevertheless, it's a big hole. I know Costa Mesa, the city of Costa Mesa, has adopted an incredible ordinance to open the process up on labor negotiations. They require an independent auditor to come in and cost out 30 days before they even begin negotiating the cost of each element of the existing labor contract. And then every time there's an offer and a counteroffer, he has to cost it out. And the public's aware of what the cost of each offer and counteroffer is, and builds real pressure on council members to be responsible with public dollars. So I just want to note that. Redistricting commissions. This is something near and dear to the heart of a lot of Sacramentans because we went through a rather unpleasant redistricting battle in 2011. Right now, the rule is in Sacramento, as is in many cities, kind of the traditional rule, is the city council draws their own council lines, their boundaries, every 10 years. And they have an inherent conflict of interest in doing so. And oftentimes you see council members, to no great surprise, drawing lines that favor their reelection or punish their opponents, or otherwise bring political issues into what should be a political free zone. So the solution a number of cities have now adopted has been to create redistricting commissions. Sacramento had a redistricting committee in the last go-around, which had no binding authority, purely advisory, and its 4 proposed maps were promptly ignored by the city council, who went behind closed doors, basically, came up with a map. What was the result of that map? Well, you had on almost a civil war in Oak Park, they were infuriated that what they considered to be a core element of their community, the Sacramento Med Center, had been pulled out of their community and moved into an adjoining district. That was just reversed by council action just a few months ago, once we've had kind of a change in the power factions on the council. So all of a sudden, they're now doing redistricting changes mid-decade to settle political disputes. Now, each side has good arguments. I don't want to dismiss or minimize either of them. But the point is, it's a highly politicized process. Independent redistricting commissions go a long way to take the politics out of it. And the key elements are the authority of the commission, whether it has true independence, and then what criteria do they use to draw the lines. As far as authority, some of the commissions that exist out in California cities are merely advisory, much like the Sacramento committee was for the 2011 redistricting. And those, frankly, probably aren't even worth the time or the candle. Independence is probably the most critical element of a redistricting commission. Are they appointed by council members? If so, the suspicion is they're going to be carrying the water for the council member who appointed them. There are some benefits to having it appointed by the council member, in that there's some degree of political accountability for how the redistricting commission behaves, but I think the general consensus is that you really go a long ways to having a fair, political free redistricting if you have a process for selecting those commissioners that is not tied to the members of the council. There's some hybrid methods that have been used to do that. The one system that has a lot of appeal is the one in San Diego, where they have retired judges who appoint the members of the commission. You may not get people who are as qualified under that, but I think, frankly, you will get the good people to rise to the top, and they will be appointed. With regard to criteria, the criteria spelled out right now in the Sacramento City Charter, and these are all fine criteria, and it's unfortunate that they're not uniformly followed because of the involvement of politics in the resolution and in the settling of maps. The most important one is the one man, one vote rule, one person, one vote rule, where the council districts have to be of equal size, otherwise voting power of an individual is different than someone else's, which just can't be the case. That's the single most important criteria. But there's another critical criteria that's kind of imposed on us by federal and state voting rights acts. And that has to do with the impact of redistricting on minority communities. And in Sacramento, this is really a serious concern. In Sacramento, the Hispanic, the Latino community is the largest demographic group. And how many Latinos currently sit on the Sacramento City Council? None. How many Latinos have served on the Sacramento City Council in the 160-year history of Sacramento? He knows the answer, 3. That's kind of astounding, don't you think? When we took a look very carefully at the redistricting maps in the 2011 redistricting, we were so concerned we brought it to the attention of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in San Francisco, who do a lot of work in this area. And they crunched the numbers, and they found that there were 2 districts that could have been designed to be this close to being what are called a majority-minority district, where a majority of the people there, the voters, actual voters, would be minorities. And federal law provides that if you have what are called a majority-minority district, you cannot draw the lines in a way that undermines or destroys the voting power of those districts, of those minority groups. But we were literally, I think, 0.5% off from hitting that threshold where they would have been legally compelled under federal law to respect the voting power of the minorities in those districts. But it didn't qualify. And so the actual lines that were drawn, primarily for the protection of incumbents, essentially stripped the Hispanic community of the voting power that they otherwise could have had. We could very well have had 2 districts where the predominant voting power was Hispanic. And it's unfortunate it did not happen. We're hopeful, if you do a redistricting commission, that they will have a greater respect for those considerations than for the political preservation of the incumbents drawing the lines.
Okay, you done? Good. Holly, did you want to add something to that?
Let me just say about the league and redistricting commissions. We think that that it's 3 words. It's an independent redistricting commission. It just has to be independent, and so we would very much support a process like the retired judges, or another process like Prop 11 gave us, which was the California State Independent Redistricting Commission. So the selection is critical.
Councilmember Harris?
I have not met one person who came away from our last redistricting effort, came away satisfied. There was tremendous disgruntlement citywide about the process and about the results of the district lines. Many communities felt torn asunder. Some people feel like geographically things don't make sense. If you look at District 3, it's remarkably changed from what it was for many years. There's good and bad with that. I actually love the new economic and ethnic diversity of our district. So by including South Natomas and Northgate, Gardenland, it makes the district a whole lot more interesting. I would like to say that I'm definitely in favor of an independent redistricting commission. I would not want to go through the process that we went through last time, nor the subsequent vote on the city council recently. I think that it is imperative to take redistricting out of the hands of the politicians, because the impetus to gerrymander is just too strong. Naturally, people in a position like city council would want to represent their constituents, would have bias towards the people they feel they would like to represent. There's too much pressure on politicians. It should be absolutely independent. I also believe that this iteration of the council would embrace an independent redistricting commission.
So too.
And so maybe we can make that happen. Craig, I'd like to ask you, we had a chance to vote on this a few years back. So maybe you can remind us about that vote, because it didn't quite go the way I anticipated.
Which vote are you referring to?
The one about an independent redistricting commission and the people who would populate it. Not ringing a bell?
No.
Okay, well, I'll have to get my facts straight and get back to you on that one. But anyway, I believe that of all the people that I've spoken with, everybody would embrace this, and I think it's a good idea for the city of Sacramento.
Great, thank you very much. Professor?
Before I say anything, I've got to say, this is the most attentive, longest attention span audience I've spoken in front of in years. Like, I don't know if the microphone feedback killed all your smartphones or what, but this is amazing. Yes, Sacramento, I guess. The only thing that I have to say here is, and this is very heartening news from the council member, when I teach reapportionment and redistricting to my freshmen, they are always appropriately shocked to find that in many jurisdictions, people choose their own district lines. They just assume, of course, it's done by some independent group. And it sounds like we may be on our way to that here in Sacramento.
Okay, so this is the portion now of our forum where we're going to allow the audience to come forward and ask questions. We have a microphone in front of the stage here. You can come and stand and line up. We also have a floating mic out on the floor. Who has the mic out there? Anna, right here on the left side. Anna, raise your hand, please. So Anna will have the floating mic. You can either go to her, you can come up front here, or you can fill out a comment card again if you don't want to have to ask the question yourself. Again, we just ask, please keep your questions and comments as brief as possible. We want to make sure that everybody here gets an opportunity to speak, and hopefully we can get this all done before they shut the lights out on us. So, sir, go ahead.
And by the way, it's not just asking questions. We want to hear your ideas, your suggestions for reform.
Is that on? I don't think that's on, sir.
Ethics.
Oh, there you go.
Ethics. Because I haven't given a lot of thought to the intricacies of ethics in a government town, I think that you have to establish some goals. And what occurred to me when the issue of costs arose is that shouldn't an ethics commission be established by a transparency committee? Transparencies. And what I see here is that you're trying to establish a regulation of the city council essentially by determining how to base the codes to regulate the city council. Now, there are other ways other than through a judicial system to do that. Now, you're talking about values versus rules. There's also, those of us who watch the news know that there are big issues involving religious-based regulation. I think you're going to have to come up with a dialogue to eliminate the religion from the possible ways to regulate the city council government. You have issues of public interest versus private interest, and I don't know where you're going to draw the line on that other than perhaps in health. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Okay, who's next out there? Sir, you want to step forward here?
This next gentleman, I think, deserves a little bit of an introduction. He is the intrepid investigative reporter that I referred to before, Mr. Joe Rubin, the author of the expose articles on Metergate. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I just thank you very much. Thank you very much. Not deserved, really, but I wanted to ask some questions about this issue around email retention. As I understand it, I mean, this is something that's just really imminent, that the city clerk's office is going to dispose of these emails within a month or two. And I do think that emails are important. I mean, I have learned about how, how contracts have been kind of inappropriately handled at times, about corruption, about just today we had an article in the Sacramento News and Review about gas leaks and about a very serious situation with that wasn't being disclosed by the city that was really put the public at risk. And so I kind of want to put your feet to the fire, Councilman Harris, in terms of, I mean, I think, I want to say there's some very honorable people at the city clerk's office. They do a very good job. I'm very professional. But I think that they see this as, that this is just sort of they're doing their due diligence. They're just implementing a policy. But in fact, it's actually more complicated than that, because the policy isn't simply, hey, let's discard emails after 2 years. It's, let's keep emails that are really important, but let's discard the other ones that aren't important. And they're going to use an automated system to dispose of those. And so I guess I would just sort of say, are you willing to kind of slow things down and raise your hand as a member of the city council and say, hey, you know what, we need to ask more questions about this. This is something which should be publicly debated before, you know, hundreds of thousands of emails which could relate to crimes or corruption could potentially just disappear.
Leave it to Joe Rubin to put me in the hot seat. You know, I have concerns about it too. And I would say I'd be certainly willing to bring this up and raise some questions. Fair enough?
That's how I sit here. I think slowing things down, asking questions is just, that is the best role of transparency.
You know, as I said before, you have to strike a balance, and especially in the way you retain all those emails. I mean, frankly, most of them don't amount to much, but there may be kernels in there that are important. So how you store them and how you access them, of course, is a big deal, because it can run into a very substantial sum of money. In the short term, it's easy to retain things. I mean, obviously, you know, retaining electronic transmissions is just a matter of a storage device. So I'll have discussions with the city clerk and with council, and we'll see what we can do with this.
Are you willing to raise it at the council and have it be something that's publicly be debated at the council?
Yes.
Okay. Before these just disappear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anna, did you have somebody? Anna? No. Okay. Are these, hello? Okay. Anna, do you have somebody over there that would like to ask a question or have a comment?
No.
Anybody? Okay. Sir, come on, step on up here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jason Orda, and I live in District 6. I have only one comment in this discussion about transparency. I think that, yes, there is a concern that transparency could mean all kinds of document dumps with information that the council member referred to as emails that are of little substance. But I think that that it's still something that needs to change in city government, that we do need more transparency on how much things cost, like labor contracts, public works projects. And it's unfortunate in following these issues in the last few years, we're not getting straight answers on how much those things cost, whether they be, we mentioned the arena subsidies or what other investments could be used, could be made with the streetcar money. So there's not enough transparency out there, and I think that's why a lot of these folks are here, is that we really do need to know more about what goes on at City Hall, and I think that's very important. And I don't think there's too much information, but I think there's enough responsible citizens in this town, journalists and people, and it's a government town, a lot of people have worked in government, that can pick out what's important and what's not, and I think we can do that. The only other, the question I have, it's for everybody here on the panel, or anybody who's willing to answer it. I think the big problem with politics today is that there's just a lot of money from very few people entering the system. A lot of us in this room do not have the money to make campaign contributions, you know, and the like. So how would, I mean, has there been any talk on this commission about publicly funded campaigns, or what is this group's approach to trying to ensure that the principle of one person, one vote stands and it's not overwhelmed by money?
Okay, who wants to take that question? I would like to have a shot at that. Okay.
So regarding your last concern about publicly funded campaigns, I'm a big believer in that. You know, in my opinion, when you mix money with politics, you get a bad result, almost universally. Nobody who is supported substantially financially by somebody, I think, is completely free of some influence, myself included. And so it's kind of a two-edged sword. it takes a lot of money to run a campaign. And if people are not allowed to solicit donations, then only the very wealthy will run for office. And that's not the result we want. It is difficult to fundraise and run a campaign, I found out firsthand. And I ran a campaign on a very slim budget with very small donations, for which I'm very grateful, actually, because when I vote, I am pretty much free of the influence of special interests. And that's how it should always be that way. And so in 2002, the city passed an ordinance that would subsidize campaigns for city council. But it was defunded when the recession hit. In fact, I don't think anybody ever made use of that fund.
Maybe in one election a little bit, but it was really a non-starter.
Yeah, it didn't, so nobody availed themselves of it with any great result. But I think it would have helped me in my campaign. The first couple of $1,000s were the hardest to raise. So the way it was set up was, I believe, a city council member, aspiring council member, would be afforded $20,000 to start, but they would have to agree to a funding or a fundraising cap. I believe it was $88,000. And I think that that's a pretty good model. I would like to reinstitute that. It's a code that's still on the books, and I intend to bring it up. We're going into the budget process now, and every council member is going to have a wish list of things they'd love to achieve. This is one of mine, because I think that it would lead to, excellent quality candidates running who can be freer of special interests. I think it's very powerful medicine. So I would hope that the people would support using their tax dollars to do that, to help publicly fund city council campaigns. So we'll see how far I get with that. We're in tough budgetary times. There's no doubt about it. We face some very serious financial troubles ahead. It's going to be tricky to navigate financially through 2017 through 19. It's very clear, looking at budget projections, that we've got some squeeze play coming ahead. So if I can convince the council to fund this, I'm not sure, but I'd certainly like to try.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Okay, next.
Next.
Person in the back. Good evening. Thank you for holding this forum. My name is Dave Janae. I'm with Crime Watch, 21 years serving our community here. I'm curious how many people here are with Nextdoor? How many people connected with Nextdoor from East Sac, Marshall School, Midtown, Boulevard Park? Great. Glad to see that. Obviously, you know who I am. Craig Powell, Brown Act. 83% of the voters in this state said put it in the Constitution because we cannot trust government to follow the law. That was backed up by the California legislature to put even more teeth in it. This city has a record of ignoring the Brown Act with absolute impunity. I watch it every council session for the last 60 days as people who hate our police officers and lie about them with impunity stand before that council, and our mayor and our council members engage them in colloquies on items not on the agenda when they take over our council session, and nobody speaks up and nobody says that's a lie. I'm angry. That's why I'm here. When are we going to hold elected representatives who take an oath to defend the Constitution of the state of California and the United States and recognize that the 14th Amendment means something, and the California Public Records Act means something, and the Brown Act means something? And when are we going to invite our police chief down here to give us the same transparency? How many of you people used to go to the Hart Senior Center where they told you the names and badge numbers and the days and the hours that your police officers worked in your neighborhood? Did any of you remember that? 8.5 by 11 piece of paper on the table when you came in, along with the neighborhood watch materials. Why is that no longer available and it's refused? I'll tell you why. Because we have half the number of police officers working in patrol in our city every night, every day. Calls waiting, no units to go. officers risking their lives going on calls that require 3 officers because there's a weapons call. I'll leave with this. If we can't trust the people who run our police department because he's a puppet for the man pulling the strings up there on the dais, and a city manager who at budget negotiations with the police union says, I'm going to threaten you, and that threat means 167 positions cut and 200 civilians like CSOs, CSIs, the people who used to come out and take our crime reports. It's no wonder crime is down. Please, use your power. Use your power of the press. I want to echo what I understand my friend Craig said about Cosmo and Sacramento News and Review. Cosmo, if you're still here, I want to shake your hand. God bless you, sir. You're the only one telling the truth in this godforsaken town.
Thank you, sir, for those comments. We appreciate that. Sir, would you like to step on up?
This is the initial meeting of this group, as I understand it. And this early in the process of developing some guidance about open government, I'd like to suggest that some of the concepts in the Administrative Procedure Act be considered. This is a body of work that governs the adoption of regulations when organizations assume the legislative function. I don't advocate copying the state statutes and provisions of the Administrative Procedure Act verbatim, but I think there are many ideas in there that strengthen open public processes and will enable people to get a clear process and some ideas about getting a clear process about the adoption of matters before the City Council that have economic effect. The Administrative Procedure Act, as a matter of fact, requires some statements be made about projected economic effects of proposals. And I think that the Administrative Procedure Act may serve as an area that could be looked at for useful components of open government initiatives here in Sacramento.
Okay.
Outstanding idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ma'am? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Melinda Willie, McKinley Park. Greg, you had mentioned that the attorney that was involved in the opponent's lawsuit to the arena is here, and you invited him to come up and speak on how an ethics commission might have helped that situation. I would also like to invite him to come up and share his opinion on how an ethics commission might have helped in that situation, if you're still here. I don't know who it is. Who is it?
I saw, well, here he is.
Yes, my name is Jeff Anderson. I'm one of the counsel representing the plaintiffs, several taxpayers in the challenge to the arena subsidy. I'm fascinated by this whole dialogue. I also think that what we're doing here tonight is listening with an eye to the future about things that obviously need to change. But what I'm involved in and have been involved in up to my eyeballs with my co-counsel is basically a forensic exercise that I believe has exposed criminal behavior on the part of City Hall. I can hold it. It's fine. I can tell you we have documents from the mayor's office where there are instructions being given to city council members on the ad hoc arena committee and high-level city staff members that they are to actually actively withhold vital public information about this arena deal. There's a whole network of Gmail accounts that are used at high levels to communicate that, as Craig Pallas indicated, are arguably immune from Public Records Act requests. There's a lot of shenanigans, and I think that when our case is tried in June, it's going to be a pretty amazing story that we're going to be able to tell. And I know that Judge Frawley is already interested because he's rejected a lot of challenges that have been brought to the city on a legal basis to try to throw us out of court numerous times. But we're not going away, and this is going to get resolved, and I believe we're going to prevail. Sacramento needs to save itself because what's going on right now is an atrocity. We've talked to other legal people with legal experience on municipal levels, decades worth. We've disclosed the information that we have in our case, and frankly, they say it's the most astounding situation they've ever seen. This is a big project. It's controversial. Reasonable minds can differ. I'm going to disagree with Mr. Councilmember Harris, though. If you're going to have an involved electorate, you need to have a notion on the part of the people that they're hearing real, factual information. The underground, backroom deals and nonsense and catering to special interest that is a textbook model of that has happened with this arena. It's got to stop. And I think that this is a good step. Get a commission with enforcement.
Thank you, Jeff, very much.
Did we have somebody on the left side of the room with a question?
Hello?
That's some sustained applause.
Okay,
Next speaker.
I guess I am. All right. I want to thank Ion Sacramento and the League of Women Voters very, very much. This is a discussion, or the beginning of a discussion that absolutely has to happen. As an educator, I've heard thousands of lies from the students, but also from up above. And when I go to the city council meetings, the critical element in truth, truth being the whole truth, nothing, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The biggest thing that's very, very, very extremely obvious is all the backroom deals that everybody's been mentioning. You can just tell that most of the information isn't being told, and that when you have that feeling, then you lose hope, or you lose that spark of life. And I can kind of feel that there is that spark of life kind of coming back into the electorate when we can begin to get the impression that we're not being lied to by omission, mostly. So anyway, well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
I'd like to respond to that for a moment, if I may. And he triggered a memory of mine. In the report that we did on transparency, the element of it, me being kind of a long-winded writer, submitted to Nicholas, who was our editor of the report, I think maybe 13 pages. He brought it down to 4 and edited. One of the things that was left on the cutting room floor was something that was proposed by Ion Sacramento's executive vice president and one of our early founders, Greg Hatfield, who just passed away a year ago. And we dub it the Hatfield Rule. And he was an absolute strong advocate for the adoption of a rule that would require every city staffer who testifies before city council to be sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and to sign that statement annually under penalty of perjury, so as to put something of the fear of God into city staffers not to spin the truth when they are testifying before city council. And that's certainly a suggestion that we'd like to throw into the hopper when we go into the drafting.
Okay. Sir, come on up.
Thank you. My name is Tom Harrington, and I'd like to make a comment regarding the gentleman here. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Peter Shearer.
I think one of the crucial elements of this whole thing is the disclosure. I think there's nothing more positive than to know that your affiliations, your donations, where they're coming from, that they be timely, that we know what's going on. I think that needs to be a component of this somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Sir?
Hello, how you doing? Is this for questions and comments?
Yes.
Okay, I had a few things. I read over this last night. I'm Jamal Jefferson. How you doing? Okay. First question is, how long would it take to get this commission started?
Well, the time period for the adoption of these reforms are such that we are targeting to have a package of legislative proposals be vetted by the public and presented to the council probably by the end of the summer. That is a target.
Okay. Second question. How would this ethics commission affect young voters and unregistered voters who do not believe in the system any longer because of the distraction of the cost of living and not being educated on any form of government? Would the commission also reach out to all citizens if money is secured for this commission? I heard someone inside say something about the charter, get it funded through the charter, or maybe I read it wrong.
I think it's an incredibly germane question, if I can speak on it for just a minute. Education about local government. You probably ought to have a long lunch with Kimberly about what's needed about restoring civic education in this state, in this county, this city, so that people actually get educated on what local government really does. People don't know the difference between city and county governments. It's a terrible problem. If you don't understand it, you're certainly not going to be engaged with it. You're going to be disconnected. You're going to be suspicious. With regard to what can we do to help young people vote and get involved and civically engage again, if we send the message consistently that we stand up for honest government, a square deal for people, that they're not going to be cheated by their government or their government officials, if we do everything we can to make it easy for them to engage in city government, everything, make it, I analogize the city being Walmart, you know. Walmart greets people when they come in the door. They want people to come in and look at the merchandise. They want them to be familiar with it. They want them in there buying. That kind of attitude, that customer-driven attitude, public-driven attitude, is absolutely essential to make people get over the hump of actually engaging again in civic affairs and engaging directly with city government.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I can speak for a large group of young people. We're not the occasional voters. So I'm pretty sure the councilman, I'm pretty sure he skipped over a lot of people through his campaign manager. They target voters who vote. So therefore, we're ignoring a huge population of citizens. And to me, I feel my generation is going to suffer simply because I don't believe in, I think government shouldn't be secret. We should have full access and they should put people first. I feel like every government is turning into board members. And at the end of the day, I heard the councilman say you do need money to run an election. But I think I was in an election in college, and they put a cap on how much money you can spend, $80. I think that's something that should be considered to get the elected officials to working for the people again. And I think if you want to be elected, you should use Tom and Jerry. You should get out there and knock the doors the old-fashioned way and get money totally out of it. Because if you want to represent the people, I think you should meet the people. That's what I believe in. I think that's the old American way, and that's the old-fashioned way. And one more question? No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great questions. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions, comments, or suggestions out there?
Come up to the mic, please. We should have the mic back a little bit. I don't want people to be intimidated to come up to it.
I guess my one thing was you keep on saying independence, that someone's going to be independent. And it seems like we all know that we all have opinions. So I guess in some ways what he was saying is that the best we can get is full disclosure. So we kind of know where you are, because everybody has a viewpoint. So you can't get away from the fact that everyone has a viewpoint.
Well, I think that when it comes to adjudicative matters, where fairness is vital, for instance, deciding whether someone has violated an ethics code, or whether and how to draw district lines for city council districts, that on adjudicative matters, independence matters a very great deal. To the extent that independence means separating it from the rough and tumble of the political process. No, are those commissioners going to be fully free of biases of their own? No. We're not going to create a perfect world, but we can improve, I think, on the world we've got now.
Okay, because that was the one thing that kind of gets me, because every time you have a group get together, there's usually someone who speaks out. And
Yeah.
I used to go to a lot of city council things, and you come in with ordinances, with everything, and you just realize that you were talking to a wall, because it had already been decided. So
Well, we're
I
trying to
think
break
people,
down those
you know,
walls.
People can be involved, and so the independence thing was, I was kind of going, independence, so, okay.
Thank you very much.
Anything else you want to add before I close? Okay, well,
Ask any more questions.
yeah, are there any other questions? It looks like everybody's had their opportunity. So with that having been said, this will conclude our forum. We'd like to thank you very much, especially those of you that stayed until the end. I'd like to thank our very special panelists that came tonight, Council Member Jeff Harris, Professor Kimberly Nalder, and Mr. Peter Shearer. Again, thank you very much.